Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. The shape of the Biden administration's foreign policy is becoming clear, at least whatever it's defined to be. The actual goals are not entirely clear. We have had in the last couple of days the Biden administration declaring that at the southern border there is no longer a state of national emergency. So that they canceled the Trump administration policy there.
What did they do? They just kind of wished the emergency
Exactly.
away. Okay.
They wished it away, and lo and behold, there is no longer any emergency at the southern border. At the same time,
Wish I could do that about money. Just wish it to me,
No, absolutely, yeah. But at the very same time, in fact, literally at the same time, they declared that there is a state of national emergency with regard to Libya, because apparently there is a dire threat that the family of Muammar Gaddafi, who was overthrown by the activities of the Obama-Biden administration 10 years ago, that they may come back and help themselves to Libyan assets and whatever, and ISIS might come back, and therefore there is a state of national emergency with regard to Libya. No fault of Biden, of course, had nothing to do with anything that the Obama-Biden team did in 2011.
And isn't democracy a bitch if they get back into power? If the people actually voted for them, oh my goodness! See how democracy fails again. We got to rethink this concept, George.
Exactly. In the meantime, the Biden team, continuing with the Trump administration's silly policy regard to Venezuela, it continues to recognize Guaido as the, quote, legitimate, unquote, president of Venezuela. The EU has actually abandoned the US. This is one of the few times the EU has actually deviated from the US. The EU has abandoned that policy. And it looks as if the United States is distinctly increasing its military presence in Syria. So that's continuing again with the Obama policy of foolish military interventions in the Middle East. No movement at all on returning to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. So pretty much is what one would have expected from an Obama-Biden third term.
And Afghanistan looks like they're going
to walk. And Afghanistan, that there's no prospect of any withdrawal.
Though I'd like to point out for our viewers, as of February 8th of this calendar year, it has been 1 year since an American soldier has been killed in hostile military operations. 1 year. Okay.
Yes, and the interesting thing is that has
proves
to vitiate this idiotic media claims and claims by Biden and the people around Biden that Russia put bounties on the heads of U.S. servicemen. So how did that happen if no American serviceman has been killed for a
it
year?
Shows that the Taliban have kept their end of the deal.
So, but in the meantime, the Biden held a 2-hour telephone conversation with President Xi of China. 2 hours seems an awful long time for a conversation. We don't know exactly why it took 2 hours. It may be that Biden had difficulties hearing, difficulties understanding even the interpretation. Maybe he fell asleep at some point in the conversation. But 2 hours is an awful long time, even with mutual interpretations and everything. The American readout was very, very brief. Again, hard to see how, given the lack of substance there, why this justified a 2-hour conversation. But what was interesting is that the list of issues that was mentioned in that readout, which is the treatment of the Uyghurs, the Hong Kong, Taiwan, none of that has anything to do with American interests. the Chinese readout of the telephone conversation was longer, but they made the distinct point that we're not going to tolerate messing around in our internal affairs. We're happy to work with the United States, but not when it comes to our internal affairs. Now, given this readout of, in which Americans are raising issues that they can't affect one way or the other. I mean, it's just an impossibility. And given what Biden has done in regard to China, for instance, removing the restrictions on TikTok that the Trump administration had imposed, removing the restrictions on American schools cooperating with the Chinese Confucius program, we're getting a sense that the Biden administration is going to remove the various restrictions that the Trump team put in. Now, we can argue whether what the Trump team did was wise or not wise, but at least it was about American interests. It was about restoring America to its economic primacy. Biden administration doesn't seem to have any such goals. They keep talking about human rights and matters that pertain to other countries' internal affairs. So, as I say, we're getting an outline of a Biden foreign policy, and it doesn't look terribly impressive. Peter, what's your take?
Well, good introduction on the other broader fronts around the world, but specifically speaking about China now, it's some big muddle the way I look at it. I mean, they're putting so much emphasis. The security, his national security team has been reoriented, and they're beefing up the Southeast Asian desk. And they're putting in their top people and all of that. I don't see what direction they want to go in, except for what I find very troubling, and this is a continuation of the Trump foreign policy. I thought everything was going to change in foreign policy, but anyway, this heightened ties with Taipei and having a high-ranking, I think it was president, attending the inauguration, which is a real slap in the face. But as you point out, I mean, the U.S., they can snub China all they want when it comes to Taiwan. But if there's any moves and U.S. supports the moves for independence for Taiwan, it's a red line. And get ready, it's going to be devastating. It will be the worst possible thing to happen to the people of Taiwan. Right. Okay, if you give this false promise that we got your back, well, ask Saakashvili how that works. Okay, right. And China will not mess around. That would be as if the French say, well, let's reconsider the Louisiana Purchase. Okay, I think we need to go back there. Okay, because when the United States and China formally recognized each other under the Carter administration, it was understood emphatically that Taiwan is part of China, and it is an internal Chinese affair. Okay, though at the same time, it didn't preclude that the United States could have contacts with Taiwan. It was understood at a certain level. Okay. And that was a compromise Beijing made at the time. Now it's being flaunted by the United States, but it's being flaunted because they don't have any other kind of policy. The Uyghurs. Okay, what do you want to do? You want to go to war over the Uyghurs? Right. Sit down and think quietly about that thought. You want to go to war over Hong Kong? Right. Really? Okay. You want to punish China for Hong Kong, a part of their own country. Hong Kong, in this, the democracy movement there, it has never had democracy. The British never gave them democracy. Okay, what are they talking about? This is all inventions. Okay, and you have Ned, funneling money in there, causing trouble, whipping up trouble here. The interesting thing is that what I find very bothersome, and it's under almost every administration, is that with the exception of Trump didn't really push the military angle so much. He was a trade guy. Right. He really pushed that. Did he do it in the right way? That's a different debate. But that was front and center for him. And you know what? The Chinese understood that. It was very clear, okay? Very clear. Because you know what? That affects America's bottom line and China's bottom line. They understand that. Right. All this sniping around the margins here is to irritate Beijing, which will hinder any kind of greater understanding. Again, George and I have been very emphatic here, is that the Chinese don't want to rule the world. The Chinese do not want to export their model onto other people. What they want is they want regional security and they want prosperity. It's very simple stuff here. Okay, and what we're told that they're why is it taking so long to announce China? Well, we're talking to our allies and all of this. Okay, well, fine. Are we going to use human rights? Okay, so let's look at Thailand. Oh, they're having some problems with some human rights there. Let's look at the Philippines, having some problems with human rights there. So blanketing this all up in democracy is a farce. Okay, it's not going to work that way. Oh, another point here. All of the countries that the United States wants to court on China's borders and in the region at large, they all have trading relationships with China. Okay, this is not the Soviet Union where it was autarkic; it was closed off. Okay, and there was no leverage with trade because there's no trade. There's plenty of trade here. Okay. And all of the talk of decoupling that we heard under Trump, yeah, there was some decoupling going on. Asian countries decoupling from the United States because they saw they're going to have to choose. They're going to choose China over the United States, okay? They will, because the United States gives them a modicum of a military umbrella. But that is the worst possible scenario. It's that, we're putting all our eggs in the basket that we won't be annihilated. Okay, well, rational thinkers are thinking, why don't we have a different track where we can have good relations with them and become prosperous? Okay, and it's no coincidence that the EU agreed weeks before the Biden administration came into office a big investment deal with China. Okay, so as Blinken in his mandarins of foreign policy, they're all B-listers. Okay, they really are B-listers. These people here. The world is moving on, okay? China is cultivating its relationships around the world. Its Belt and Initiative, Belt and Road Initiative, it's already going into the European Union, okay? How are you going to unring these bells? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think that, if you are the president of the United States, your goal is to advance the national interests of the United States. So the national interest of the United States is that its economic supremacy that it enjoyed, certainly since World War II, but even especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union, has been undermined. I mean, for decades, economic supremacy has been undermined. Jobs have been shipped overseas. Offshoring, outsourcing, all that has disappeared. And even when it comes to cutting edge technology, Huawei seems to be moving ahead of the United States. So a United States president does have a responsibility to restore America to the position it had. I mean, whether it's doable or not doable, that's part of your job description. Now, what's striking here about the Biden people is that none of that is really features in any of their thinking. For them to be raising issues about Hong Kong, Taiwan, the Uyghurs, it's kind of strange. I mean, what does any of that got to do with the American national interest? I mean, it just doesn't. I mean, and rather than the issues that at least Trump raised, which is, that basically, China, to put it in the way that Trump used to put it, has eaten our lunch. We can argue whether that's the case or not, but at least that is discussing American national interest. But of course, if you do that, you have to address the problem in the United States itself, namely that too many people are on China's payroll, and too many people have a vested economic interest in shipping jobs overseas, in advancing China's interests rather than those of the United States. So China's doing nothing wrong, at least when it comes to trade issues, but plenty of people in the United States are doing something wrong, and they, by no coincidence, were the ones who were desperate to get Trump out of office.
Yeah, well, the Chamber of Commerce, they've decided what side they're on. They're on China's side, okay? You're absolutely right. I mean, the U.S. is focusing democracy promotion. I mean, isn't that a dead letter by now, folks? I mean, haven't we heard this enough? Okay, it has nothing to do with democracy promotion. When you hear democracy promotion, it means they have no idea what to do. Okay, that's their default rhetorical position here. No, the issue is here is that the horse is bolted from the barn. I mean, Trump told us, the state of affairs. You can't turn the clock back. That's not going to happen. It really gets down to the captains of industry. Look, the Bezos and the Silicon Valley folks, all of the big pharma people. I mean, you have to decide. I mean, you want profits, or do you have any kind of inkling of protecting the country itself that made you so rich? Right. And I think these people don't care. So, Biden, and we know, and I don't want to go into details here because I think it's going to be soon to be revealed in a certain amount of time, just all of the tight connections that Beijing has with so many politicians in the United States. And I'm not going after either party. I'm going after both parties, okay? I mean, this has gone on for so long here because money screams, as Bob Dylan said, okay? And so I think they're number one, they're backpedaling because they don't know what to do. They're backpedaling and they're trying to find some kind of face-saving way of, we're working with our coalition and all that. Well, these countries, again, unlike Europe, I mean, you think Japan is going to go to the mat for Australia? I don't think so. Do you think the North Korean, I'm sorry, the South Koreans are going to go to the mat for Japan? I don't think so. Okay, I mean, this is all illusory here because China, unlike the United States, has one thing front and center: the national interest. They care about promoting their own country's interests, and they do a very good job at it.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And that's the problem with the United States, because you have a political elite that is literally on the Chinese payroll. I mean, if we start looking at the various politicians and how they have become rich over the years, you can see that it's nearly always through doing business with China. And of course, doing business with China means doing business with companies that are linked to China's military, China's Communist Party. So there are huge vested interests in cultivating good relations with China at the expense of the United States. And I think that if you start messing around with that hornet's nest, you're going to trigger a lot of outrage within the United States. Now, Trump tried to do that, but it's a big project. But if America wants to return to the position of economic supremacy and wants to abandon that sort of Obama view, hey, these jobs are gone, forget that. Let's just sort of make code that we can just code instead of that. If you could do that, then okay, America can go back to being number two. But if you're a president, neither of us is an American. But if you're an American, then you think, hey, we like being number one. We want to go back to being number one. So, but there's no indication that the Biden people have the slightest intention of going down that path, even though rhetorically they say, we'll continue with our getting tough with China.
No,
it's not going to happen.
It's just words. What needs to happen, and this is what it'll sound really crazy, but it would be necessary, is a completely bipartisan putting aside infrastructure project for 10 years, okay? And start spending money on rebuilding the economy, dispense with all these trade links and chains and all of that. Where's the bullet train in America? Where is it? And we've talked, remember when Japan had one in the 1980s, and that was the big, China's going to take over the world, all the Japan, They had their bullet train. Well, where's our bullet train? I mean, we've been looking at other people's bullet trains, okay? And then China says it will build one in California, okay? And they could do it in a short amount of time and at a reasonable price. No, because they're vested interest in the United States. They want to build all the regulation, all that, and it never gets built, okay? So, that's why. I mean, why is America failing vis-a-vis China? Because American elites have failed, okay? They much rather import junk from China and give it to a dwindling, immiserated middle class, okay? Done, okay? No, see, the thing is that, there's no vision. We haven't had a vision in American politics for a long time. Trump's vision was to be a disruptor, okay? And this is the first step, but it's not the last step. It doesn't bring it to fruition.
Right, no, but I think a move away from the financialization of the US economy, a move away from the rule of Wall Street and into industrial investment, whether it's infrastructure, production, the things that actually you can sell in the world, that would be a good start. But instead, the United States still is geared towards Wall Street, towards the financialization of the economy. Well, that doesn't produce jobs.
And monopolization. Look, it's no wonder Boeing can't build a plane that flies anymore. It has so little competition. Okay, look at these Black Hawk helicopters. They're dropping like flies because there's no competitive bids or anything. I mean, it's just a slosh of money all of the time. See, it comes back and bites you. You pay off all your buddies. They're all gazillionaires, and they have so many mansions and houses in the Hamptons, and they can't even remember how many they have. Okay, but you can't build a plane that flies anymore. Right. I mean, it all comes back to you. What you preached about markets and all that. No, you don't have markets. You have cronyism.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And of course, even the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is the virus, and that's still United States hasn't really succeeded in at least building a coalition of countries that can confront China and demand an explanation about COVID. So the other day, we had a ridiculous report from the World Health Organization, so ridiculous that even the New York Times wasn't buying it, that, the COVID really, the origin of COVID wasn't China. Maybe it was Vietnam, maybe somewhere else in Southeast Asia, maybe India.
It was frozen food.
Exactly. So this is just laughable. So one would have thought, here's something that could be the national interest, which is build a coalition of powers and say, we need to get to the bottom of the origin of this virus, because we can't go through this again in 10 years' time. I mean, we just can't lose, a third of our economy to yet another pandemic. But as things stand, I mean, China just denies, hey, we had nothing to do with anything, even though we know that the origin was China, and we know that China did not take proper precautions after they found out about it. They allowed international travel and so on. But again, there's nothing about that in the readout, which how about bringing that issue up? That's something that's important.
But see, that they talk about coalitions, they talk about leverage, but what they've created the wrong coalitions and focused all their energy on the wrong kind of leverage. See, this is the reason why it doesn't work. I mean, again, this hope of building some kind of Asian NATO. Well, for most of those countries, and almost all the countries we're speaking about are export oriented. Okay, I mean, they're not, with the exception of South Korea, which is a powerhouse all by itself. It's one of the most amazing countries in the world when you think about it. It's small population, but its punch in the world economy is quite extraordinary. Japan is very powerful, but it's now we have generations of stagnation. It's still powerful economy and a necessary economy in the world, but they're all interdependent on China, and China knows that too. I mean, they can't. I mean, they could go it alone, but that's not what they want to do. They want to rise to where they were a century ago, before it was sliced up by colonial powers.
Right.
So the wrong, looking at the wrong tools and applying them in the wrong way. That's why it's not going to work. And that's why you're never going to get a coalition of people, what were the origins of the coronavirus? That's not enough for people to say, I'm not going to trade with China anymore. I mean,
Right.
these people, they'd be thrown out of office in a heartbeat.
But I think that's it. I mean, that's a very good point. And it's a measure of how powerful China has become, that this issue, which affects every country in a very fundamental way, it really does affect their national interest. You actually can't put together a coalition. I mean, imagine if we suspected that the origin of the virus was Russia. We would have a coalition, from all of Europe, all of NATO, had a number of Asian countries joining, demanding answers from Russia. We want to inspect all of your laboratories, whether they're biological, chemical, whatever. We want, thousands of inspectors wandering around Russia to find out about the origins. That's if it was Russia. No one even dares to talk like that about China. And that shows you how fraudulent all the hysteria about Russia was. People do it because they're not afraid of Russia. They are afraid of China.
Right, and like I said, they put all their resources into the wrong tools and focused on the wrong kinds of leverage. The Chinese have done exactly the opposite. They've invested in every single nexus point where they not only do they not worry about it, they can squeeze it anytime they want right now, and they're acting very rational. George and I are not waving the Chinese flag here. We're being just very sober about it. Okay, the countries will advance their national interests, and some countries do it better than others. Okay, the European Union, it's a laughing stock of the world right now because of its High Commissioner for Foreign Affairs. Okay, and then Joe, like you said, probably fell asleep during the call. And then the readouts coming out like that. Where was the whistleblower on that call? Okay, they listened to Trump all the time, didn't they?
Yes.
What was his name? The little colonel, the lieutenant colonel.
Vindman.
Yeah, where was Vindman when you need him? Okay, where was a little Vindman? Okay, no, I'm dead serious. Okay, that will never happen to Biden. Never happen to Biden. Okay, and all of his phone calls are listened to by multiple people. Multiple people make up their own transcript and they reconcile because let's say you and I did it, and then we have to compare and reconcile them and have one readout. Okay, so. It's not going to happen to old Joe, okay? Because they probably will say, President fell asleep, okay? Yes. We hear snoring.
Well, again, maybe when they give him some hot milk, put some kind of a stimulant into the hot milk to just keep him going. Because 2 hours is an awfully long time for just an exchange of banalities.
But you said is probably right. Is that how many minutes were for the Uyghurs? How many minutes was it for Hong Kong? How many minutes was it for Taiwan? And I'm sure she is just like he's probably playing a computer game. He's playing Pong. He's playing Pong, waiting to get to some substance. Okay, because they're not going to move on those issues. They're just not.
Yeah. No, and I think as Trump pointed out many times, people like Xi and Putin or Erdogan, they are very smart. They are very sharp. So if you're talking to them, you really do have to be on your A game. You gotta know what you're doing. Otherwise, you're just gonna make a fool of yourself, as did our friend, the EU High Representative Borrell. If you don't know what you're doing, you are going to make a fool of yourself. And I think, but it's interesting though, just going back to Vindman, that here is, Biden does this, he drops these restrictions on TikTok, he drops that whole restrictions on this cultural exchange between American schools and Chinese schools, the Confucius program, and no one wonders about this. No one says, well, what kind of secret deals going on between Biden and Xi? I mean, that's it. Well, okay, well, that's fine. Or Hunter, what about Hunter's relationship with the Chinese? So, but the game, the media, no question.
I'm sure they passed it all by Swalwell just to make sure it was kosher.
Exactly. In fact, there's an interesting article in the New York Times which shows, well, Biden's tough talk on China is probably the reason why Xi was among the last of the world's political leaders to recognize Biden's election victory. Well, no, Xi, like Putin and like the Mexican president, did the courteous thing. He waited until the various election disputes were resolved, and then he congratulated Biden on his win. That's it. There's no,
Why should the Chinese
get about Biden stuff talk?
Why should Chinese get involved in an American shitstorm?
Exactly.
What's the point?
Exactly.
I always, what happened to the IQ of these places?
No.
Okay.
Gone.
It's just bizarre. Just, I just don't know what to make of it. I mean, maybe we were deluded in our youth thinking these people knew what they were talking about, but now it just engenders laughter. I mean, if you just apply a little bit of logic, okay, why do these countries want to get involved in the domestic affairs of the United States, which is a mess? Okay,
right, exactly, and the ones that do are really fools. I mean, like Boris Johnson and
Netanyahu.
Yeah, they're fools in rushing to recognize Biden just because CNN had called the election for Biden. Just shows that they are foolish. More intelligent, wait. Let's wait. There's no rush to do this.
But don't you think Boris Johnson and Netanyahu, they just wanted to give a kick Trump in the ass? That what they really think. What they really think.
Exactly. But that's always very short-term thinking because you never know.
Well, I mean, if you look at Israeli foreign policy, it's been one blunder after another. Okay, I mean, are they still going to have what was it? Some kind of what was it they're going to do for Trump in the Golan Heights? Like some kind.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, we're going to name something after Trump.
Yeah, I wonder where that stands right now.
Yeah, that's quite right. All right, Peter, we will, of course, maintain our laser-like focus on the Biden-Blinken foreign policy. And remember, we are now also on Rumble. So you can look us up on Rumble. And if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.